Okay.
Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you for joining us. And tonight we have, is it Judy N. Green or
It
Judy?
is. Yeah.
Okay, Judy N. Green joining us, and she is a candidate for leadership of the Green Party of Canada. Welcome, Judy.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm coming to you from Atlanta, Canada, from a small town of 300 people called Clementsport, Nova Scotia, which is in Mi'kma'ki, which is the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. And I'm very blessed to be only a few kilometers from El Sitkuk, which is Bear River First Nations, and have had the immense honor of working with them in a counseling capacity through their health center, and number a great many friends there who have helped me learn how to be a better ally. So it's we are under the peace and friendship treaties, and I always remind people that we're all treaty people.
Thank you. Well, welcome so much, and thank you for being here with us. I guess, why don't you maybe just begin by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got into this?
Awesome. I kind of slid in sideways. I didn't ever plan to be a politician. And one of my campaign volunteers always says that I may not have chose politics, but politics chose me. So I'm not quite sure how I take that, but here I am. I actually grew up in BC. I was born in Princeton, and I grew up in the Okanagan. My mother was born on the Cape Mudge Reserve on Kwapieski Cove on Quadra Island, and still have a great many family members in British Columbia. But since then I've lived in 5 different provinces. I've been an airframe technician with the Canadian Forces, one of the first women in that service, and I did my undergrad in computer science while raising my son, and finished my master's in computer science in Ottawa, and worked in high tech for about 10 years. And then I started my own business, and I did computer consulting with firms in Alberta that were not the big oil field firms, but there are so many small companies that create pumps and equipment for the oil field. It's a huge industry there, and I did a lot of computer consulting and software design for those companies. And I went on to do 3 other businesses of my own. We're back in Nova Scotia now, which is the province of my husband's family, and he's from New Glasgow, Nova Scotia, and we're about, I think, 2.5 hours away from okay, maybe 3.5 hours away from family now. I have my husband and I will have been married 38 years this year, and our son is going to be moving back. He's in Petawawa right now, and he's also in the military. And my grandchildren are going to be close again. 2 of them are here in Nova Scotia, but our youngest grandson, who was a year in February, he will be coming back to them, and they just bought a house in New Brunswick. So all across Canada is. So when people say, "Where are you from?" I kind of just say Canada. Makes it easier. But I got into Greens in politics about 2 years ago. I started with the Green Party of Nova Scotia, and was the convener for the region here called Fundy Shore. And I'm now the regional rep provincially, but I ran federally in the federal riding of West Nova, which was really my first experience. I had fully expected to work on someone else's campaign to get some experience at this election, but someone else didn't show up. So I became the someone else, and learned as we went, just used a lot of instincts, a lot of my business skills to run a campaign where we took the vote from 4.1 to 12.69%. So we tripled the vote. We came in 3rd. We beat the NDP in this riding, and we won the student vote. So that was by far the best that we'd ever done in this riding, and we now have a team on the ground. When I started, we had $36 in the account. We had an EDA that was still an EDA on the books, and I'm grateful for the previous candidate for keeping it so. But we had no volunteers. We had no functioning EDA. So we kind of started from scratch, and we are working really hard to build that EDA between elections now.
Wow. Okay, wow, what a history. Well, let's begin with some member questions. Why do you feel you would be the best candidate to lead the Green Party?
Well, I get asked that one a lot.
I bet.
And quite frankly, actually, I'm just going to ask, if you're not talking, can we get you to mute? Because we're getting some background feedback right now, and that's a little distracting. Thank you so much. Yes, so why I would be the best? Well, we have 9 amazing candidates, and I want to see each and every one of us elected in the next election. I want us to have official party status with 12 MPs in the next election, which could be as early as spring. And all of us have a lot of the same skills. We're all Greens. We have so much of the same passion. We are all governed by the same core principles. So it's hard to differentiate us all. But I am a scientist, which tends to get overlooked in the media a lot. But I have a master's degree in computer science. I have had papers vetted and presented at international conferences. And so I really understand the scientific principle. I can dig deep into the science of climate change and other evidence-based areas. But my strength is that I'm a team builder. I pull people together. I help them work well together. I'm also very process-oriented and focused on goal. So it really helps me with my computer science background. It really helps me to see where there are structural problems. For instance, when I go into a company as a consultant, I have to watch and evaluate the processes, whether they're computer processes or personal processes or paper processes, and then look at how we can optimize those processes. And so to make the whole organization more effective. And so I've been kind of evaluating that with the party over the last couple of years. And we have a lot of work to do in order to be a truly grassroots party. Right now, information flows in one direction and not in a regular basis. And information needs to flow both ways. We need to be empowering our membership on the ground, and we need to have a team of volunteers, doesn't have to be staff, who know how to do that. And we have that skill set within the party. We need to pull them together in order to affect that. We have to stop working in silos. We need to be connecting with each other and throughout the EDAs. I even ran across in the last election somebody saying, oh, well, I won't advertise in that paper because yes, I know it's in my riding, but it's also in another riding, and I don't want to waste my money advertising for Greens in another riding. And it's like we have to look at, when we raise the green profile across Canada, it's raised for everybody. Every time we can bring a green supporter on board, whether they're in our riding or not, we are helping the Green Party. We do not exist in isolation. We must work together. And it's that type of structure and helping people to actually implement that I'm very good at. And that's what I did my master's thesis on, was a pattern language for growing and maintaining highly effective groups.
Thank you, Judy. Claire and Peter, may I ask if you can mute yourselves, please?
Oh, apologies.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Sorry about that, Judy.
Sorry.
Thank you. And
I have been muted. I have been muted throughout.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just speaking to Claire and Peter. Yeah. Thank you so much. Kind of on that note, how have you handled a difficult situation in the past that involved ethics and communications?
Well, you always have to have that core of ethics, and that's one of the things that drew me to the Green Party, is because we have those 6 core principles. And one of the things that we need to do worldwide with our foreign policy is be looking at having the same sort of ethics around basic human rights. So I can't really speak to one specific issue, because that is a core element of every decision that I make. is that it must pass the ethical guideposts, or we just don't do it. We find a different way to do it within that ethical guideposts. You know, I think once we lose that, we lose credibility, and we lose being effective and being sincere with ourselves. So that is a personal commitment that I've made within my life to ensure that I'm always acting on an ethical basis and for the purposes of others, not for self-interest.
Excellent, thank you. And so let's pivot a bit to the current situation that kind of globally we're all feeling, the pandemic. How will you link pandemic recovery funds to companies that set green targets?
I think that that's a really important factor to move us into the new economy, because it's quite obvious that we're not going back to normal. We really can't. The financials just aren't there anymore. You're already seeing huge numbers of companies and financiers pulling out of oil and gas, and companies such as BP saying 60%, they're shutting down 60% of their oil and gas production and ramping up 40% to renewables. You're seeing that more and more now. So it's really when we started to see what was happening with COVID and just envisioning what we were going to have to do to restart the economy, I thought, wow, this is so awesome, because we already have the plan. You know, Mission Possible is that plan that will restart the economy. It's almost like the Greens are ready. We've been practicing. Send us in, coach. It's I was really excited about that because we have those solutions, and I think it's also a really critical moment with COVID-19, where people have changed their habits, they've changed their lifestyles, and it's only going to be a very narrow window where we can make these major changes in how our society runs and how our economies run. So we really have to be proactive about getting these changes in place and making sure that the subsidies are there to encourage the growth in renewables and in, you know, retrofitting the infrastructure to be net zero, to be making sure that we have a soft landing for our oil and gas workers, and now for so very many workers that are out of work with because of COVID. I think now we have to kind of expand a little bit and look at the type of work that we could be encouraging for women, because a great many women far more proportionately are out of work because those are the jobs that are gone now, not coming back. And so there are some, you know, people who study this are looking at it and saying that women's rights really have been knocked about 20 years back, because of COVID-19 and just the structures of what can open, what can't, how childcare is factored in. And a lot of hesitation about sending children to school. So a lot of parents are choosing to homeschool, which means one stays home, and still it's not always the women, but it is disproportionately women. So there's that aspect too that I think we need to flesh out a little bit more beyond what we've said in Mission Possible. But Mission Possible certainly gives us the bones for moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Now the economy is reopening from the pandemic. We're seeing plenty of cars back on the road in Vancouver, especially where we have really built up a transit culture here pre-COVID. How do we get people to leave their cars behind?
Yeah, and that's a real challenge because of the physical distancing challenges on public transport. So, you know, really we have to sit down and look at how to make people feel safe on public transport. Obviously, masks need to be mandatory. There needs to be a sanitization routine. It may mean having an extra person on, a staff member on the bus that wipes down in between on a regular basis. You know, we have to make people feel safe. And that's really, really critical. It's really frustrating to see some of the gains we've had roll back because of COVID, and that includes public transportation. That also includes like plastic bag bans. We just got one in place here in Nova Scotia, and then almost immediately, once COVID started, they banned reusable bags in the grocery stores and required you to use their plastic bags. They're now just allowing you to bring your bags back in, but you have to package your groceries. So we're still learning about this virus. And so there's still a lot that we don't know, and we have to be adaptive as we're going forward. But there needs to be a commitment for that. And in Vancouver, you know, bike lanes, making other forms of commuter transport is really important. One of the things I liked about Ottawa is that a lot of the green spaces they had were designed as commuter trails to the work areas from the residential areas, and to actually have it planned that way through the planning process for the cities. I think it's really critical to have that as being a top priority, and really thinking outside of the box in terms of how to do that. Even, you know, as people are more comfortable, or the bubbles are a little bit wider, maybe looking at rideshare if they're not comfortable going on public transport. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, now I'm going to switch it over a bit to some East Van specific questions, not necessarily only us, but that are very prevalent here. BC has had 728 overdose deaths in 2020. What can the Green Party do in Parliament to bring attention and real solutions to this crisis?
Well, you know, it really hit us hard, I think, all the way across Canada when we saw that headline that the deaths from overdoses were higher than the deaths from COVID-19. And we're seeing that the mental health stresses all across Canada also factor into the addiction. When you have somebody who is an addict and they're under even more stress, or somebody who's recovered, they're more likely to become addicted again or start using again if they're under stresses. And we just don't have the supports in place for that. As we said in the last election, we really need to decriminalize opioids. We need to make sure that there are safe injection sites. And we need to make sure that when people are found with in possession of opioids, that instead of incarcerating them, we find them treatment and help them be treated, because it is a disease. It's an illness. It's not a failing of character. It's not a criminal activity to be an addict. And we have to work a little bit more on the public stigma around that. You know, people don't understand about being an addict, or being homeless, or being, you know, so in poverty that you're having a hard time, you know, feeding your family or keeping a roof over your head. For some reason, we have this stigma around that in Canada that is not backed. It's not evidence-based, quite the contrary, that we see that people who are caught in these cycles have a really hard time getting out. They need a hand up. You know, they need just that little bit of foundation. They need that support. And I'm really concerned too, as we're finding with addictions, that one of the things that really factors into being an addict is having a disconnect from a social structure, a support structure. And when we're having to physically distance, that's made even worse for people who are maybe on the verge of that, or really having problems with that. So it's really important that we be reaching out to family members, friends, and making sure on a personal level to do what we can to make sure those connections are in place. But on a legislative perspective, we need to make sure that we decriminalize opioids, make sure that those safe injection sites are open and available, staffed, and have the supplies they need, and that we have the programs available. And it costs us a whole lot less to put somebody through you know, a detox program than it does to incarcerate them. So, you know, when you run into conservatives in your riding, you know, start talking the numbers with them, and it becomes clear very quickly that it's a much more economical decision to actually treat somebody rather than incarcerate them.
Mhm. And let's kind of on that note as well, let's talk about guaranteed livable income
Mhm.
and
Love
how.
guaranteed livable income. I think we all do, right?
Mhm.
And I didn't at first because, I didn't know too much about it. When I started reading it, if anybody hasn't, a really good introduction to it is Utopia for Realists. It's a really good book that gives you a lot of references to many of the trials that have been done, including MINCOM, which was done in Manitoba. And it inevitably, doesn't matter what version of it or where in the world it's been used, it shows that it has benefits that are beyond just paying somebody. Um, you know, it has a reduction in addiction. It has a reduction in crime. It keeps people in school longer. People are more likely to start a small business or to be working part-time, especially very critical for people with physical disabilities or mental disabilities who may not be able to ever work 5 days a week, 40 hours a week. And that's how our system is set up. And our current social safety nets don't really are not flexible enough to go in and out as people are able to work a little bit here and a little bit there without risking that solid foundation. We really need to have to put dignity back into our social safety net, because there is no dignity in the current social safety net. I spoke a little bit about the negative impressions of people who are needing that extra help. But we have to look at it in terms of what a benefit is to our society. Science is telling us that babies do much better if they have a parent caregiver for the first 2 years, do even better if they're breastfed for 2 years. Well, a working mom can't do that. And but if she wants to stay home and can, because she's on guaranteed livable income, that's a huge benefit in terms of that child's health, which is a direct effect monetarily on the healthcare system for the life of that child, as well as mental health. So we have to look outside the box and like the full cost accounting of what our decisions are. And I often say, we say Canada is a resource rich country, but I would say even more so that our best resource are our people, and we need to be taking care of our people. That intellectual capacity that we have is going to be so much more beneficial and something that we can export in the future, because our economy is not going to look the same going forward. We are already seeing massive changes in that now, and we really need to be having it built into the system to be able to handle shocks like a pandemic, which I'm told that this will not be the last one that we have to deal with. We have to have something that expands and contracts while still providing that support, and that's a guaranteed livable income does that. And it does it for existing circumstances, like here in West Nova, and I know in the Okanagan is much the same, that most of the jobs are seasonal, which means it's tourism or forestry, or in the Okanagan a lot with the orchards, that sort of thing, that people count on getting their hours in the summertime, and then they're on unemployment in the winter where there isn't work. That is the normal cycle of employment in many areas across Canada. A guaranteed livable income manages that. It balances that quite nicely, because you're dealing with, at the end of the year, a balance that you start to have tax back if you're at a higher level. And it's just much more equitable, and you're not having to qualify for it. If that's the most demoralizing process to go through. I hope that nobody on this call has ever had to do that, but it is, and I've heard it from so many people. I've experienced it myself with my family, and it doesn't have to be that way. And that's one of the things that when we're talking about a guaranteed livable income now, where there's so much appetite for it, and we have 50 senators that have put forth a proposal. We currently have an NDP bill on the floor, or gathering signatures right now, that we have a Green MP has seconded that. It's and there's different versions of it. So I think we need to get something in place, something that all the parties can agree on, and with the understanding that we will learn and we will adjust as we go forward. I'm worried some of the wording and some of the feedback is, oh, well, I don't like their plan because it's not perfect enough. I like my plan, so I'm not going to support their plan because I like my plan. Come on, folks, let's get something in place. You know, let's get something in place, and then we can start working with it. So I just don't want perfection or the illusion of perfection to be in the way of getting anything done.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Are there any, I'll open it up just a bit now. Are there any questions from anyone in this chat before I go on? Yes.
Hello, Peter. Can we get you unmuted there, Peter?
Hi, how are you?
Excellent. I am fabulous. How are you this evening?
Not too badly, thank you very much.
Cool.
And I look forward to seeing you sometime this autumn. We're leaving Vancouver for Nova Scotia at the end of this month.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Where are you landing in Nova Scotia?
We are not sure yet.
Ah.
We think maybe around New Glasgow. I was brought up in Chester down the South Shore there.
Nice. Excellent. Excellent. Yes.
And there are two things I'd like to bring up. One is tobacco.
Mm-hmm.
Are you aware of how many people die of tobacco smoke in Canada on an annual basis?
Far too many. Mm-hmm.
Over 50,000.
Mm-hmm.
That absolutely dwarfs all the opioid problem we have. Something like 800 or 900 of those people who die of tobacco smoke are non-smokers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the tobacco companies are getting away with this, and I think that's disgusting. I hope, I've been talking to Andrew West about this, and a few people here. I've put a motion forward with the BC Greens to have the smoking age raised to 21. I've been absolutely gobsmacked by the lack of interest in this throughout the Green Party. Andrew West actually he sees it, he understands it, and he's using it a bit on his campaign. But the United States raised the smoking age to 21 last year. Prince Edward Island did it last year. British Columbia has done diddly squat, as have the rest of the provinces. The numbers are, it's about 26 billion are the physical costs. And when you start adding other things, such as the Elephant Hill fire here in British Columbia that, what was it? I've forgotten how many thousands of square kilometers of woodland that it destroyed, plus over 120 homes caused by a smoker. And yet, nobody seems to be interested in working on this at all. And I think that's, we're lacking here. Okay, I've done my say on that. The other thing I'd like to suggest is, I've been to quite a few EDA meetings here in Vancouver, and I've never felt we've done anything at them. I've never felt there was an accomplishment made or an end towards which we were sitting around chatting and drinking tea or beer. And I would like to suggest that every EDA pick a cause in their area. And, one of the ones I would like to see worked on here in BC, there are some for instance, WISH, which works with women and children in distress. And they need help. So if an EDA could get together and decide, okay, let's work with these people, see what we can do as individuals, and how we can amplify their message even if it's just that. it's positive, and it gets the Green Party into the community rather than just sitting around a table, having a tea and discussing internal Green things. We're being a part of the community. And especially here with COVID, the stress being placed on families, and I worked with a young lady here in town whose husband all but killed her. She was so badly brutalized. It took months and months and many operations to get her working again. She was a great employee. And at any rate, that sort of thing has got to be helped. And so I suggest WISH, but I mean, every EDA has something in their community that could use some help.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that, Peter. Yeah, that's one of the things that I recommend when we're talking about things to do to keep the EDA alive and active between elections, is that outreach into the community. Look at what your community needs, what the interests are of the people in your EDA, and align yourself with organizations that are doing good work in the community, and just go out and be green. Be green together in the community, helping with community issues like that. Like in our riding, what we were going to do was we'd already got it set up that we would have a dragon boat race with our local group, and it would be benefiting somebody else, but it would be a Green Party group that would be crewing one of the dragon boats. And then yeah, there's a lot of things, like there's the big bike. I can't remember which that one's for, but there's a big bike that you can be part of to raise funds for other organizations as well. But then you can be doing something that is hands-on. Like we have a Clean Annapolis River project here, and they're always looking for people to do hands-on testing of water for plastic particulates and stuff like that. And they train you how to do that, and they go out and blitzes. So you're doing it all as a group in the community. And so I think we need to do more of that, Peter, absolutely. And with respect to the smoking, I think there's been a concerted effort to reduce smoking over a great period of time, and there's been a lot of inroads in that. I think they probably are at the point where they think they're at diminishing returns, but I do like the idea of raising the smoking, the age for smoking. But I think there also still needs to continue to be an educational component. Being on the Digby and Area Community Health Board has taught me that in order to be effective with health policy, is that it's not the same as you can legislate and then enforce. There is no enforcement aspect when you're talking about public health. It is through peer pressure, and it's through education. And it's really important to ensure that we're putting money into that. And I don't see that at this point in time. So you brought that to my attention. I appreciate that, Peter. There was a time where that was the case, but it isn't as much now. And perhaps we need to be encouraging more of that.
I don't think it's, for instance, I put a thing forward before the last civic election here. And I sat down with Pete Fry and Mike Weeb. Is that right? Yeah. And my suggestion was that every tobacconist be required to sell pocket ashtrays, so that people have no excuse for butting out on the street. We live in an ashtray here in Vancouver, and that every tobacconist be required to put up signage describing the damage done. And the city, instead of doing that, which would have cost nothing, it would have meant spending the time making a minor alteration on a licensing deal, what the licensing thing for the tobacconists. And that's it. That was the entire cost, spent a whole bunch of money on pocket ashtrays and gave them away. They wound up on the street. Quite frankly, if the smoker is given an ashtray, their chances of them using are a lot less than if they have the volition to go and buy it. And so I thought it was just a total waste of time, and it just galled the hell out of me that they spent money on it. Pete and I get along fairly well. I was ticked.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes
anyway,
we rely on gimmicks like that, but it really comes down to when you want to make people have positive changes in lifestyle in their life, it has to be their decision. And that comes from not bullying, not ugly pictures of things that could go bad, because there's all sorts of cognitive dissonance, different ways that they get their head around that to allow them to continue doing what they're doing. It is a form of addiction and it needs to be treated that way.
I can tell you, I used to smoke 3 decks a day.
Yeah, so you know.
No addiction. And I've worked with addicts and been told by guys who are off morphine that getting off morphine was a bunch easier than getting off nicotine.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it.
Thank you, Peter.
But I would be dead against anything that is going to cost money other than the building of materials and indeed for education. And it should definitely start before the age of 12, or roughly the age of 12. And that kids in that age from 12 to 22 it's drilled in a lot, the problems that they're going to have because of a tobacco addiction. And certainly, anybody who's sat at the bedside of somebody dying of COPD or cancer and seeing their friends go, and certainly more of us have seen friends succumb to tobacco than we ever will COVID-19.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Sorry,
you,
Judy, go ahead.
Okay. I think James, that's okay. I think James had his hand up. I think he wanted to respond.
I have a question too. It's kind of a nerdy question, 2 parts. One is, what do you think of GVote? And then the bigger, real interesting question I have is, how do you think we could use computer technology in the Green Party to be more effective?
Oh, this is right in my wheelhouse.
I figured you'd be a good one to ask.
Absolutely. Actually, I think that GVote is an amazing piece of software to have been created within a party like this. There's a lot of potential there. I've never seen the back end or the code. I don't know how expandable or adaptable it is. There can be software that looks really good on the outside, but it's an absolute nightmare to expand. I work in object-oriented software, so when I write a program, it's very easy to add on to it or expand it. But some of the older coding styles are much more difficult. So not diving into the code itself, I really can't say how easy it would be to expand it. But there is a new technology working group that is just being formed. And they are looking at exactly these issues. We need to be able to have GVote on tablets so that we can be entering the get out the vote information at the door. This writing stuff on paper, printing stuff out, then hoping it gets back into the system. How many people is involved in that? Boy, we don't have that many volunteers who are technical capable. That's just not happening. And we didn't get that recorded simply because we didn't have enough people on the ground with those skills. But had they had a tablet in front of them that they could have just tapped a few things and entered it right there, we wouldn't have had an issue. So
I'd love to see that. Yeah,
we really need that online.
Guys in Burnaby and Amada's team, they actually made a little front end that ran on a phone.
Nice.
We used that for a bit, and it had the sort of a front end, but it had some issues. But it was certainly a lot easier to just do it right.
Exactly. I mean, we have this data. Essentially, GVote's a database. You know, whatever front end we decide to build on it, it's still essentially a database. And so, if you look at it in that way, we should be able to just with SQL queries be able to manipulate the data with a completely separate app. It doesn't have to be a GVote app. You know, we can still call it GVote, but it could be completely new code that's directly accessing the data in that database. But we need to really look at some of the structural issues within it, because you get to a point with software that you just keep adding bits onto it, and then it ends up being this behemoth that's impossible to maintain or to expand on. And then you have to say, okay, no, we have to start from scratch and rewrite the whole thing. And we don't have the resources to do that, even with volunteers, to do a complete rewrite. But I think with the idea of having qualified computer programmers under the tutelage of or the direction of our staff, our IT staff, as to what can or cannot be done, and design it together. I think that we do have that in-house expertise, but we need to get past this hesitancy or barrier that seems to happen right now about there being any cooperation or interaction between members and staff. That's the big hurdle right now that we have to get past in order to have a collaborative exercise like this. Technically, there's nothing stopping us, but it's this strange barrier between there being any interaction that we have to eliminate.
What about like a big site license to Nation Builder or something like that? That's a software company that's already done it, and that's their business.
Yeah, and that is that's a possibility. I know that some of the leadership contests have been using Nation Builder. It is, you know, that's something that we may want to look at if we decide that GVote is just too large and cumbersome to be cost effective to maintain. If we worked with GVote, or pardon me, Nation Builder, and had even some proprietary Green Party add-ons to it. You know, we just have to have like a software development kit that allowed us to hook into the appropriate bits of code that we would need. But all of that's possible. You know, it's about talking to them, negotiating, seeing what we need, you know, how we're going to get there, and negotiating to get the best deal and access that we need.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks. Anyone else with questions for Judy? Yes, Terry. Oh,
you
Terry.
Need to unmute there, darling.
Bottom left.
There you go.
If you were chosen leader of the Green Party, what would be your 3 most important things that you would like to bring up in the House of Commons that you think need the most work on immediately?
Immediately, well, guaranteed livable income would be a really high one. A clean green recovery, just recovery, using green technology out of COVID-19 would be the second. Third, whoa, gee, I have to choose one. Let's think. Well, you know, I think we need to be really rethinking a couple of things. Absolutely, we need to look, if we want healthcare to be full-on healthcare, we need to have the pharmacare, we need to have, you know, eye care and dental included as well. I know that's a big ticket item, but we really need to be looking at that and starting the campaign for that going forward, because it takes a long time to change the minds and wills of those who are already in Parliament. One of the things that I say is we have to stop electing people and then trying to change their minds. We need to elect the people that already have the right ideas in mind. And that's why we need more Greens in office. But we do have to work with the other parties. So it takes some time. It's almost like as a small business owner, I know when you're doing marketing and advertising, you know, people have to see it somewhere between like 14 and 21 times before they decide, oh yeah, I do need that. So in a way, we need to be doing that with these ideas, with exposing the other MPs in Parliament that would be voting on these things to these ideas at least that many times.
See, that's a very good issue, because it seems every time I go to get a prescription, because I have no extended benefit,
Mm-hmm.
I pay myself.
Mm-hmm.
Not covered, not covered, not covered.
No.
Or like, what should we not be working on getting this stuff available for the lower incomes? Because obviously I'm an old age pensioner.
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm just getting sick and tired of keep hearing not covered.
Yep, exactly.
And I mean, the drug companies are making all the big money.
Exactly, exactly. And there is a lot of benefit by doing, I understand that medical is all managed at the provincial level, but if we can organize the provincial governments to be accessing the economies of scale and the negotiating of drugs at a federal level, then that effectively makes the costs go down for all of the provinces. So it might look like something where the federal government sources the drugs because they can have that bargaining and the economies of scale, and then distribute those medications to the provinces at the lower rates.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Judy.
Hi, it's Brett. I'll jump in with a question since I'm the one person who hasn't yet. I just wondering, you know, in the Green Party, we're very good at appealing to people's minds. We make rational arguments, but where do you see the balance of appealing to someone's heart as a leader?
Well, you know, and I think that is exactly true. We are so fact-based and evidence-based, and the computer scientist in me loves that. But the coach in me and the marketer in me says, no, we have to be listening to what people need, and then finding out what it is, what their pain is, what they're running away from, find a solution for that. And that we can do just by changing the way we sell the platform that we already have. You know, we have these amazing policies that are a breadth right across the scope of what the Canadian experience is. We have to get better at understanding by asking people what's important to them. Then you get an idea of what is important to them. So for instance, a big problem is that we end up getting this us against them with oil field workers, because if you look at what they're actually afraid of, it's not that they love oil and gas so much, it's that they are afraid of not having a gainful income and not being able to support their family. You know, that's what they're afraid of. And they feel like the rug is being pulled out from underneath them. So of course they're going to be defensive. And so that's why we have to really be selling the transition that, you know, what is it about oil and gas that you really like? You know, what is it about that job that you love? If it's the paycheck, awesome. You know, there's other things that can provide you that paycheck. We'll provide, you know, training and transition. We'll provide a guaranteed livable income until you get on your feet in your new job. You know, it's about making sure that we can communicate with people, that we understand what they're afraid of, and that we have a solution for it. And if you look at the marketing, very negative marketing that the Conservatives have done, they rile up fear, like they know what people are afraid of, and they play to that, but they make it look like it's somebody else's fault that they're afraid of this, or that they're afraid of this happening. And so they're working on the same principle, but in a very not very ethical way. This is one of the things I've never liked about marketing, is that oftentimes it uses those psychological, the science of psychology against people, where we can use the science of psychology for people by being able to explain to them how our our policies will affect them personally. You know, and you have to be careful about not ever assuming what people want. We as human beings think that other people have a similar experience to us, and that's not always the case, and it'll get us in trouble every time. So that's why I'm a huge advocate of a listening campaign, really talking to people, listening to them, asking them, you know, probing questions to find out what is important to them. Like we even do the little sheet with about 8 different top issues that we knew were important to people in our area, and we asked them to rank them and give them a pen and hand it to them. And it amazed me how thoughtful people are when they're doing that, and they may add a couple extra where there's space to do so, and that allows us to open that conversation, having some knowledge about that person and what their priorities are by how they rank them, and the ensuing conversation. And it really helps you to understand how to, and you're not lying or being disingenuous, you're just explaining it in a different way. You know, as an educator teaching people in workshops, I understand that not everybody learns the same way or looks at things the same way. So I may have to explain something 4 or 5 different times, different ways, to make sure everybody understands what the information is that's being taught. And that's no different at a door. You know, people are understanding and thinking differently. And just because they may have a blue sign on their lawn doesn't mean that we can't talk to them.
Excellent, thank you. Any more questions from anyone before we wrap up here? Thank you for staying with us, Judy. We know it's late where you are.
Oh,
Is it almost 11 or
it's
12?
11? It's 11:55.
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! Well, thank you so much.
Thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Okay. That's
thank
okay.
you for chatting with us.
Thank you, and thank you, Terry, for sharing your sunshine through the window with me. That's awesome. I really appreciate everyone who came out tonight. I know everyone's getting a little bit tired of the Zoom calls. There's been a crazy number of them. Really appreciate that you took the time to ask really good questions. If you would visit my website, type it into the chat. It's just www.judyngreen.com. And there you can nominate, you can donate, you can join my campaign. We're still looking for volunteers, and help us get the word out about all the work that we're doing. We've got our videos and podcasts up there now. And I don't know if you guys heard today, but the People, Politics and Planet podcasts are out now. And those are about half an hour, 45-minute interviews, both in English and in French. Unless you are very patient with my French, your ears may be a little sore by the end of it, but I am learning.
That's excellent. Well, thank you so much. And this will be available on Facebook for anyone who couldn't join us this evening.
Excellent. Yes, as soon as I finish the recording here, I will make that available tomorrow, and you can share it with your other members of your team and on Facebook and social media. Awesome.
Excellent. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night,
Yes,
everyone.
look me up when you get to Nova Scotia, Peter.
I will do that.
Excellent. Excellent.